Mount Rainier looms at 14,410 feet, its glacier-covered slopes both mesmerizing and deadly. Known as Tahoma to Indigenous people, this active stratovolcano sits just 59 miles from Seattle. Every year, around 10,000 people attempt to climb Mount Rainier. While the vast majority make it back down safely, the mountain claims lives almost every season. Its steep slopes, hidden crevasses, and sudden storms have led to countless accidents, and in some cases, deadly falls. In this video, we'll look at 4 tragic instances where climbers lost their lives after falling from Rainier's unforgiving terrain. On May 27, 2014, a group of 6 climbers set out to conquer Mount Rainier, and they weren't taking the easy route. They chose Liberty Ridge, known for its steep ice, unpredictable weather, and avalanches waiting to strike. Leading the team were 2 seasoned guides from Alpine Ascents International, Matt Hegeman, 38, and Eitan Green, 29. Hegeman was a Rainier veteran, having summited the mountain over 50 times. Green, fresh out of Colby College, had quickly made a name for himself in the guiding world. The 4 clients were equally impressive. Uday Marty, a 40-year-old Intel vice president with a passion for the outdoors. Mark Mahaney, a 26-year-old adventurer from St. Paul, Minnesota, and 2 others whose names weren't released. But they were experienced enough to tackle Rainier's toughest climb. Their plan was straightforward: ascend Liberty Ridge over 3 to 5 days. It was a typical timeline for this challenging route. On Tuesday, May 27th, they made their approach via the Carbon Glacier, and by that night, they set up camp at Thumb Rock, a natural resting spot at around 10,700 feet. From there, things started to get intense. By Wednesday morning, the weather was clear, and the team pushed higher towards the Black Pyramid, a steep, icy section of the ridge. But as the day progressed, conditions began to deteriorate. Still, the climbers pressed on. At 6:20 p.m., the guides made a satellite phone call back to the Alpine Ascents office. They said they'd set up camp and would reassess in the morning if the weather improved. That was the last official contact. But it wasn't the last anyone heard from them. At around 7 p.m., one of the climbers texted a photo of their camp to a friend. It looked normal and didn't indicate anything alarming. Another climber sent a signal from a spot tracking device at 7:45 p.m. It wasn't a distress signal, just an all-okay check-in. But something about that location didn't sit right. The GPS pinged their camp between 12,400 and 12,800 feet, not a typical spot to set up for the night. Still, nothing seemed urgent. Then, silence. Friday rolled around. The group was supposed to return, but there was no sign of them. Alpine Ascents notified Mount Rainier National Park, and the search began immediately. By Saturday morning, a team of rangers was climbing Liberty Ridge, hoping to find any clue. They reached the summit, but there was nothing. No footprints, no gear, no climbers. It wasn't until a helicopter flyover that the first grim signs appeared. Near the base of the Willis Wall, a notoriously dangerous section known for rock and ice falls, the helicopter crew spotted debris, scattered gear, torn tents. But the most chilling discovery? Signals from the climbers' avalanche beacons. All 6 were pinging from the same spot. That's when the heartbreaking truth became clear. Rangers concluded that sometime during the night, an avalanche, or possibly falling ice from the Liberty Cap, swept through their camp. The climbers were likely asleep in their tents when it happened. They were believed to have fallen 3,300 feet down the mountain. Park Ranger Fawn Bauer didn't mince words. There's not a viable chance of survival. The area was too dangerous for a ground recovery. The Willis Wall is a funnel for avalanches and rock falls. Sending in teams to retrieve the bodies would risk more lives. The park suspended ground searches, though aerial surveys continued in the weeks that followed. This was the deadliest accident on Rainier since 1981, when 11 climbers were killed in an ice fall on the Emmons Glacier. And it hit Alpine Ascents International especially hard. Just a month earlier, the company had lost 5 Sherpas in the April 18th Everest avalanche, the deadliest day in Everest's history. Now, they were grappling with another massive loss, this time on their home turf. Uday Marty was remembered by colleagues at Intel as a brilliant mind with an adventurous heart. Mark Mahaney's friends shared stories of his love for the outdoors and his unbreakable spirit. Matt Hegeman and Eitan Green were respected guides, known for their skill and dedication to safety. The mystery of exactly what happened that night remains unsolved. Was it a sudden avalanche, ice fall from the Liberty Cap, or a combination of both? We may never know. But Rainier's deadly reputation didn't start there. Years earlier, the mountain had already shown its unforgiving nature, claiming the lives of those trained to protect others from its dangers. It was August 13th, 1995, a clear Sunday morning on Mount Rainier's Emmons Glacier. For three climbers, John Graver, Michael and Anna Szymanski, it started like any other summit attempt. They were experienced hikers from California, prepared with the right gear and knowledge to tackle the 14,411-foot giant. Their climb began on Wednesday in perfect weather, and by Saturday, they'd reached the summit via the popular Emmons Glacier route. On their descent, disaster struck. Graver slipped on a patch of glare ice, tumbling 60 feet down the slope and breaking his ankle. Stranded at high altitude with no way to move, the trio was in serious trouble. At around 5 p.m., another group of hikers found them and quickly alerted the National Park Service. That's when two young rangers stepped into the story. Philip Otis, a 22-year-old student conservation worker from Minnesota, and Sean Ryan, a 23-year-old seasonal ranger from New York. Both were skilled mountaineers, handpicked to work during the peak climbing season from June to September. Equipped with ropes, ice axes, and a first aid kit, they set out from Camp Sherman at Steamboat Prow to stabilize Graver before a helicopter evacuation. As the sun began to set, Otis and Ryan climbed steadily, navigating the treacherous terrain with precision. But Mount Rainier wasn't about to make things easy. The weather shifted. Fierce winds whipped across the glacier, temperatures plunged below freezing, and the ice hardened into a slick, glass-like surface. By 11:30 p.m., the Rangers were just 200 feet below Graver, near 12,800 feet. They radioed back to the ranger station, reporting the icy conditions, but confirming they were pressing on. That was the last anyone heard from them. The radio went silent. When dawn broke, a second rescue team scrambled up the glacier to locate both the stranded climbers and the missing rangers. Around 10 a.m., a helicopter managed to extract Graver and the Szymanskis from Emmons Glacier. But there was still no sign of Otis and Ryan. That changed about 30 minutes later. The Rangers' bodies were discovered at the base of a cliff. They had fallen 1,300 feet, still roped together. It's believed one of them lost footing on the glare ice, dragging the other down with him. Despite their training and experience, the mountain had claimed them in an instant. Their deaths marked the first time in Mount Rainier National Park's history, since its establishment in 1899, that rangers were killed in the line of duty. The aftermath shook the climbing community to its core. Philip James Otis was laid to rest at Lakewood Cemetery in Minneapolis, Minnesota, while Sean Hunter Ryan was cremated. A portion of Ryan's ashes was scattered on Mount Rainier, the very mountain where he lost his life, and the remainder was inurned at Indian Hill Episcopal Presbyterian Churchyard in Cincinnati, Ohio. Their deaths, the first ranger fatalities in the line of duty since Mount Rainier National Park was established in 1899, ignited widespread debate. Many questioned whether the National Park Service should implement stricter regulations for climbers attempting the summit. Some argued for more thorough experience checks, mandatory affiliation with established climbing groups, or increased fees to fund safety measures. Others wondered if more could be done to protect rangers, whose rescue missions often place them in extreme danger. Despite these discussions, the unpredictable nature of Rainier remained clear. No amount of regulation could ever fully tame the risks of this formidable mountain. On July 27, 2010, Lee F. Adams set out for what was supposed to be another routine descent from the summit of Mount Rainier. At 52 years old, Adams was a familiar figure in Seattle's climbing community, a research scientist at the Institute for Systems Biology by profession, but an adventurer at heart. Originally from Maine, he had spent years scaling peaks across Washington and teaching new climbers as an instructor at the Washington Alpine Club. He was methodical, experienced, and known for his unmatched energy, often outpacing climbers half his age. His climbing partners trusted him implicitly. If there was anyone you'd expect to handle Rainier with ease, it was Lee Adams. That summer day, Adams wasn't climbing with seasoned alpinists, but with a close friend from Texas and the friend's two teenage sons. Just like our previous story, they had chosen the Emmons Glacier route as well, Rainier's second most popular path to the summit. They reached the summit without issue, but as any climber knows, getting to the top is only half the journey. The descent can be even more dangerous. As the group began their descent around 13,000 feet, conditions were stable, with good weather and firm snow. The team was roped together for safety, following a standard glacier travel technique designed to arrest falls and prevent crevasse accidents. Lee Adams was at the front, serving as the lead climber, while his friend from Texas and the friend's 2 teenage sons followed behind, each spaced about 15 to 20 feet apart, connected by a dynamic climbing rope. This roped setup is meant to distribute tension evenly. If one climber slips, the others can dig in with their ice axes and crampons to stop the fall. The lead climber sets the pace and navigates around visible crevasses or unstable snow, while the last climber, or anchor, is responsible for ensuring the rope stays taut, reducing slack that could turn a slip into a dangerous fall. And that's what happened. The last climber on the rope, one of the teenagers, tripped. What started as a small slip quickly escalated into disaster. The sudden pull on the rope yanked the entire team off their feet. In seconds, all 4 climbers were sliding uncontrollably down the icy slope. They tried desperately to arrest their fall, digging ice axes into the glacier's surface, but the hard, compacted snow offered no grip. Their crampons skidded uselessly against the ice. The slope funneled them toward a 35-foot deep crevasse, a gaping crack in the glacier that was impossible to avoid. The first 2 climbers crashed onto a false floor inside the crevasse, sustaining minor injuries. The third climber landed harder, suffering knee injuries. Adams, at the front of the rope, had the farthest to fall. He plunged deeper into the crevasse, beyond the false floor, and died on impact. The 3 surviving climbers, though injured and in shock, managed to climb out of the crevasse. Their priority was to get back to Camp Sherman, the high camp at 9,450 feet, where they could find help. It was a grueling, painful journey, but by nightfall, they reached the camp and were met by climbing rangers. The next morning, a helicopter airlifted the injured climber off the mountain, while the other 2 descended on foot. Later that day, climbing rangers were flown to the Winthrop Saddle and made their way to the accident site to recover Adams's body from the crevasse. The news of Adams' death sent shockwaves through the Seattle climbing community. He wasn't just respected for his climbing skills, he was admired for his dedication to teaching and mentoring new climbers. For over a decade, he had been a cornerstone of the Washington Alpine Club, guiding countless climbers through their first ascents and challenging expeditions. Friends and colleagues struggled to grasp the loss. Pat O'Brien, chairman of the Alpine Club, reflected on Adams' extensive experience in the mountains, noting how ironic it was that after so many difficult climbs, it was a standard route on Rainier that led to his death. Fred Slater, another longtime friend, was stunned. Adams was known for his speed and strength on the mountain, often out-hiking and out-climbing everyone else. His death felt surreal to those who had shared the mountains with him. Adams's impact extended beyond the climbing world. As a scientist, he had been instrumental in groundbreaking research at the Institute for Systems Biology, and his colleagues described him as both brilliant and deeply passionate about his work. He brought the same enthusiasm to his professional life as he did to his outdoor adventures. His legacy lived on in the climbers he mentored, the friends he supported, and the scientific discoveries he helped advance. On August 22, 2022, Chunhui Zhang, known as Henry to his friends and family, set out with a group of friends on a private summit climb of Mount Rainier. At 52 years old, Zhang was no stranger to the outdoors. A devoted husband, father of 2 daughters, and an active member of British Columbia's hiking and climbing community, he loved pushing his limits in nature. The group had chosen to ascend via the Disappointment Cleaver route, the mountain's most popular path to the summit. It accounts for 75% of all summit attempts on Rainier, drawing climbers with its mix of rock scrambling and glacier crossings. But popularity doesn't mean safety. The Cleaver itself, a jagged ridge that begins around 11,400 feet and stretches up to 12,400 feet, is notorious for steep slopes, loose rock, and unpredictable footing. Even experienced climbers tread carefully here. Zhang and his friends successfully reached the summit, but it was on the descent that tragedy struck. As they carefully navigated the rocky ridge, 2 guides from International Mountain Guides, preparing for a separate expedition, noticed Zhang standing slightly apart from his group. Witnesses later reported that he seemed to be looking out, perhaps admiring the vast expanse below, when he suddenly lost his footing. Unroped and exposed on one of the steepest sections of the route, Zhang slipped and began tumbling down the Cleaver. The guides immediately radioed for help, but there was little anyone could do in that moment. The fall was substantial, sending Zhang plummeting down the rocky face. By the time rescuers could mobilize, he had vanished from sight. The National Park Service, NPS, sprang into action. Climbing rangers and guides from both International Mountain Guides and Rainier Mountaineering, Inc. attempted several searches, but the rugged, unstable terrain made it nearly impossible to locate him immediately. The Cleaver, with its sharp drop-offs and frequent rockfalls, posed serious dangers to anyone attempting a rescue. Hikers above the search area could inadvertently dislodge rocks, putting rescuers at further risk. By Tuesday morning, after several failed attempts, the NPS brought in a contracted helicopter. The rangers were flown onto the mountain, carefully navigating the treacherous terrain until they finally located Zhang's body. Using specialized harnesses, they secured him and airlifted him off the mountain to a safer area before transporting him back to base. Also known as Canfix to friends and families, Zhang was a husband and father to 2 young daughters, one of whom was just 12 years old. His sudden death left his family facing unexpected financial hardship. In the days following his death, several local organizations launched a GoFundMe campaign to support Zhang's family. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. 505 individuals and groups donated over $51,000, showing just how many lives Zhang had touched. Friends described him as someone who lived to help others, whether in the mountains or his community. Zhang's wife expressed her gratitude in a heartfelt letter, thanking everyone for their support while also offering a warning to fellow adventurers. She urged climbers to cherish their lives and consider the loved ones they leave behind when venturing into dangerous terrain. Mount Rainier has claimed many lives, but the memory of climbers like Zhang continues to inspire those who follow in their footsteps.